What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down why on earth tomorrow is going to be a massive day for the stock market, as the big guy Jerome Powell is going to be talking right before the market opens. So it's going to be very important for all Tesla investors, for the entire market, for the stock market, for the real estate market, the economy, and so on and so forth, as it will give us bigger hints on what on earth the Fed's monetary policy is going to be, which will affect the entire markets and billions of people around the world. That's why tomorrow is going to be a big day. I'm also going to break down some big pieces of news affecting Tesla, something very interesting I saw on Twitter involving Tesla, and also what the data tells us for tomorrow for Tesla, and why I do anticipate some potential downside. Now, before I break anything down, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, deposit any amount of money into the account. You're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in a week, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla was up about 5.93% for the day, and it went almost exactly where I predicted it would go. I mentioned to everyone I predicted Tesla would fight for this 117 to 118 resistance zone right here, break above it, if we broke it, I'd be expecting it to go to almost 124 to 125 and fight right here. We ended up peaking at about 123.5, so we were off by like 50 cents. Once again, still very, very close. It came very close to this zone, and overall, it did almost exactly what we predicted. Now, I also want to mention the fact that on SPY, it was a little bit different in a way where we did get rejected off this level, but it went almost exactly where I predicted to. And this was because of what on earth the previous trends were telling us. We got a nice breakout to 393.7. My target was 393 to 395. If you were watching yesterday, you would have heard me say that. And that's where SPY ended up going. But we did get a rejection off that. So I want to really break that down in just a couple of minutes. Now, before I talk about technicals, let's talk about tomorrow. Why is it such a big day? Jerome Powell is going to be speaking 30 minutes before the market opens wherever you are in the world. This is important because I have a feeling, okay, this is just my gut feeling, he's going to be more hawkish. I think he's likely going to cause the market to come down a bit. That's my prediction. Please remember, the market could move up or it could move down on his words, but in my opinion, it's more likely to come down. And I say this because of the fact that we actually got some comments from another Fed speaker today, known as Bostic. I apologize if I said that wrong. Bostic. He basically spoke and he said that the Fed is likely not going to pivot for quite a while, and they're likely going to keep the Fed funds rate above 5% or at 5% or higher until 2024. So we're not going to get a pivot for a while, is what he basically suggested. The Fed might start the pivot process by basically pausing on the rate hikes, but they're going to likely pause for quite a while. So he said some hawkish things. That's part of the reason why the market ended up actually slowing down and actually cooling off a little bit more than I would have expected, right? I didn't expect it to cool off this much, but I did expect it to actually come to this high level. So I was correct about that. I was just a little bit off on how much we would end up dropping, but I couldn't have predicted what the Fed speaker would say. So things like that happen. Now, I do believe this downside is going to continue. We're going to see a continuation of this downside. And I also believe that Jerome Powell will likely be a little bit more on the hawkish side, because I think he's very uncertain about certain aspects. So he's not going to give us too many definite answers, but he will likely say things about how, the Fed may have to continue to raise rates. They're going to keep rates higher than many people would have wanted. Unemployment's going to go up. I mean, I just think it's much more likely he's going to say hawkish things than dovish things, and the market is likely going to come down a little bit more because of what he says. And I believe that as the market comes down, this will end up dragging Tesla down temporarily. Now, you also have to note that the news will also affect Tesla. That's something I can't always predict. I don't always know what the news is going to say, so that's also another factor. But as of right now, I'm not seeing any major headlines or signs of them just yet, so I don't expect a major headline to really affect Tesla too much. Now, so far, what's worth noting is the fact that we are seeing higher demand in China now after we did see more price cuts. This is because of basic supply and demand. Obviously, supply of these Teslas is relatively high, seeing their production, the big increases, and the backlog. I'm very impressed by what they were able to produce, but the demand was very low in the past in China. So as they've lowered these prices, demand is slowly catching up to supply. That's actually very good for Tesla. We are starting to see more and more of the orders coming in, and we did actually see the delivery times actually increase. So that's not the best of things we want to hear, but it's also kind of a good thing because we are seeing higher demand, which should actually make earnings not as bad going forward. So it's just worth noting there have been some improvements, at least to some degree. Now, what makes Tesla a great company is their cars are very unique, and there are very few cars out there where you could actually watch an NFL game while waiting for your car to charge. So, very incredible. I know someone posted this on their Tesla, and I just wanted to call this out because Tesla does not get enough appreciation, in my opinion, for how incredible of a company it is. I think that people often scream the flaws in this company, and they often whisper the accomplishments that this company has achieved. Because when you see a company achieving so many things, big accomplishments become normalized, and people tend to forget how incredible this actually is. These cars really are very futuristic, and I can't wait to see what else is yet to come. As more models come out in 2023, I believe that will be the time where the share price starts to show massive signs of improvement. But I do anticipate that Q1 will still see some hardships. Now, from a technical standpoint, Tesla's volume was above average, which is pretty nice to see, but this higher volume could actually lead to the opposite effect if there is something bad that happens. So it's very important to note that. But I do want to note that we are getting lots of interest back into the stock, and we also saw the price pairs ratio right over here. It basically like based right here, right? It tried to bounce a little bit. It did not get a too big of a bounce. I do believe that it's going to kind of base around here for some time. I don't think Tesla's going to be extremely volatile, but I do believe that it's going to just try to base for some time before it bounces to the upside a little bit later. So it's going to take a little bit longer than expected, but it's worth noting. And this is actually in relation to what I was about to show you. That's the short volume percentage relative to price. And we actually saw this nice uptrend right here. So we did see more shorting on Tesla. I mentioned this previously. So if Tesla does make a big move in the future over the next 2 weeks, we could see the share price make a big move to the upside thanks to the higher short interest. But as of right now, this is something I'm just mentioning for the more medium term future. For the short term, I'm actually more bearish on Tesla. I'm going to show you exactly why. And I'm just talking about tomorrow and the day after. So we have Jerome Powell speaking on Tuesday, and on let me see, Thursday we have CPI coming out, and I do believe that it's very likely the market's going to drop approaching CPI, and the probability is the market could bounce maybe during CPI or after. I think it's a little bit more likely we may get a lower than expected CPI report, hopefully. But before it happens, we are going to likely see more downside, in my opinion, because of Jerome Powell. Now, on SPY, I just wanted to note the fact that what I mentioned in my previous video was I was looking at the MACD and the RSIs, and it's quite obvious we had this bullish divergence that actually ended up playing out. And then when looking at the bullish divergence, my thesis was 374 was the temporary bottom on SPY. And we would start to rally to the upside slowly. And you could see we were basically like ping-ponging off this trend line. Every time we touch it, we get a bit of a bounce. And my expectation was 393 to 395 on SPY. That was my target. SPY ended up peaking at 393.7. So we came very close. The only thing I did not expect was a big rejection like this right after this trend line ended up getting broken above 393. Now, the thing is, the Fed sometimes talks and they say things you don't expect, and that's what played the big role in us selling off. So I just want to note that there are two main possibilities I'm seeing on SPY, and this will affect Tesla. I will get to Tesla in just a couple of minutes. I'm seeing SPY come down like this. And we're either going to fight for the upper line of the wedge, which means around that 385 level. I do think SPY will come here, and we could actually form a bottom there and then bounce, and maybe depending on CPI we get a push up. I don't know for sure though. I don't want to focus too much on CPI just yet, but I do believe we're set to come down to at least 385. However, there's another possibility. And I just want to note that the market could be very volatile and very crazy sometimes. And we tend to see lots of crazy price action, which fools retail, it fools investors, and they might try to scare you guys, right? So, for example, when the market came down pretty hard, people were thinking, oh, we're about to come crashing down. Instead, we got a big bounce. We start pushing up. Everyone or the majority of people turn very bullish. They get so excited, then all of a sudden we get slapped back down. If that happens, people start to panic, they start to capitulate, then all of a sudden we push right back up. So crazy volatility like this could happen. And let me just show you exactly why. We had another example of this right here. Remember that time when we got that push up to almost 388 on SPY near the third week of December? We got a huge slap all the way down to 374, then a big bounce right after. This must have caused a lot of pain for people trying to trade options. It was very hard to actually play this on a very small time frame, but you guys could see how tricky the market could be. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do end up retesting the trend line. Notice how we touch this trend line, we bounce, we touch it, we bounce, we touch it, we bounce, touch it, and we bounced. So what if, and these are the two main possibilities I'm predicting, I think we might see the market kind of downtrend on Tuesday and Wednesday and maybe get a bounce on CPI. I don't know for sure though. I don't want to focus on that, but we might see a downtrend. SPY might hit 385 and then bounce, or it could come all the way down to retouch this trend line, just like how we did way back here like 5 times. We touched it, we bounced, touched it, bounced, right, and so on and so forth. If we come down to the trend line, we could actually get to the very low 380s. They could try to slap us down very hard to scare everyone, to think the market's about to crash. You have to be very prepared for that. Okay, and if that's the case, it could actually cause Tesla to make a bigger move down. On the VIX, this thing is actually on a bit of an uptrend. It actually had a pretty strong close. If it continues to push up, this would be bearish for the markets. Could we get back to 22.64? We have to break past 22 first. We have resistance right there on the 200 moving average on the hourly chart. If we break it, that's not going to be the best for the markets. But just because we break it, it does not mean the VIX is going to fly to the moon. We could actually see another reversal unexpectedly on the VIX because we still have a lot of gaps. We have we have like 2 gaps to the downside, which have not been filled yet. So, like I said, it could be very tricky. The VIX might come back up here, then get a big rejection and come down, and maybe the market gets one last pop off CPI. Who knows? But before CPI comes out, I do anticipate some potential downside. On Apple, look at the setup. You will notice that Apple had the gap here. I think it almost filled or came very close to filling it. If Apple continues to come down, I actually looked at the Fibonacci's. The 128 to 126 zone is very key. I'm not going to go into too much detail on Apple though, but I just want to know downside seems imminent. And then the QQQ is the last thing I'm going to talk about before Tesla. I just want to note that on the QQQ, we tried to hold 269.84. That's the zone I mentioned exactly. However, we did not fill our gap around 269 flat. My point is, we're likely going to fill this gap very soon and come down. And if we break below 269, we have to watch other areas like 268, 266. And I believe the QQQ is set to do that. How is it going to do that? It's going to likely be dragged down by Apple and maybe Tesla. Finally, the last thing is Neo. We have a double gap on Neo. We basically had a gap here, a giant one. We gapped up and we didn't fill this part of the gap. We push up, get a big rejection, we start coming down. Well, there's a double gap here. It's most likely going to fill the gap, and we know that Neo tends to be correlated with Tesla. So maybe Tesla comes down and that drags Neo down. That is likely going to happen in my opinion. So now let's talk about Tesla. There's good news and bad news, okay, for the people that want to be bullish on Tesla. The bad news is this setup, in my opinion, it did almost exactly what I predicted. Like I said before, we broke above 117 to 118. We push up, we almost fight for resistance around this 124 to 125 area, but we failed. We failed to get that high, stopping at 123. Excuse me, sorry guys, 123.5. Um, we filled the gap up here. I mentioned that as a possibility, but then after that, Tesla got rejected and started coming down. So if Jerome Powell comes out tomorrow and the guy is like, he says hawkish things and the market does not like it and the stock market starts coming down, Tesla could get dragged down. If Tesla, I believe this is going to happen tomorrow, we're going to fight this 117-ish to 118 zone. I have a feeling we're going to fight it. We might break below it, and we might come down and start filling this gap and bringing Tesla all the way down to 113. And then if the market's like really bearish, if we do have that fake out, like I mentioned, maybe not fake out, but it's more like a scare to try to scare people into like loading up on puts, thinking the market's going to crash. And I'm mentioning what the SPY situation right here. See how SPY has this red line, how it could come down pretty hard. That might drag Tesla down even harder, but it's not bad news because there is a possibility we could be forming a potential inverse head and shoulders. I'm sure you guys could see it from right here. We have like the head on this end, we have the left shoulder, which happened to take 2 days to form, and then all we're missing is really the right shoulder and then the bounce. So what I'm wondering is Tesla about to like come down and fill this gap, maybe come a little lower to this 108 area either tomorrow or maybe the day after, right? Maybe by Wednesday we see Tesla come down here, and then the CPI comes down and Tesla gets a big bounce and we break above 125 and continue pushing. I don't know for sure, but that is a possibility. We have a left potential shoulder, a head, and a right shoulder. It could play out that way. But I also want to note, I can't promise that because there have been instances where this happened and ended up failing because of Elon Musk selling, the negative news and things like that. So it's pretty tricky to predict. And that's why I don't want to focus on an inverse head and shoulders or like the next week on Tesla. Let's just talk about the next day to two. Let's take it a few steps at a time. And for the next day or two, I think Tesla's going to come down. It's going to fight for this zone right here, 117-ish to 118. It's going to fail, and we're going to come down to fill this gap within the next 2 days to 113. And we could even come lower because the next key support zone around there is going to be 110 to 108.28. And I do believe this zone is where Tesla could end up going to. So I am a little bit more bearish. I think that it's going to be uh, incited by Jerome Powell, and I think he's likely going to cause the market to come down. That's just my own opinion. Now, what's the bullish possibility? Well, the bullish possibility would be us retesting this zone here and actually breaking out of it. I think that's unlikely. It is a possibility, but it's unlikely. We're more likely to come down and go for this gap fill. 113 is where I believe Tesla will go to, maybe a little bit lower. All right, I just want to note all of that. With all of that said, I went over a lot in this video. If you guys really like these videos, don't forget to leave a comment down below and like them. I really appreciate it. It helps with the YouTube algorithm so that more people could gain this value. And these are just my 2 cents. I was correct about where SPY went to. I was a little incorrect about the sell-off that would come at the end of today. I did not predict that. That was dependent on the Fed. And my zone for Tesla was a test of like 124 to 125 and a gap fill. That's what Tesla ended up doing. We did stop a little bit short though, but that's a-okay. But I do believe we're going to come down to fill this gap, and 113 is my target. We may even see 113 tomorrow, maybe the day after. And if we break below that, then I'm going to be watching 110 to 108 on Tesla. And overall, I mean, we might form an inverse head and shoulders like formation if you zoom out. You guys can see the head right here, the left shoulder, maybe a right shoulder is yet to form. Maybe, just maybe, but I want to talk more about that a little bit later. For the time being, let's just focus on what Tesla's doing for now. With that said, please be ready for tomorrow. It's going to be a big day. Jerome Powell is going to make some big announcements. He may talk about the pivot. He may talk about their plans for 2023. He may even mention some things about what the Fed plans on doing on the next FOMC meeting, and he may say some other very important things. So please, please, please listen to him carefully. If you can't listen to him, then watch for any headlines and any other updates you could see. Look up some news articles and be ready. It's going to be a very, very important day. This is 2 days before CPI with Powell speaking. Thank you all for listening. Have a great rest of the day. Get ready for Tesla. I am anticipating some downside, okay? That's just my prediction. Predictions are not always going to be perfect because there are other factors such as the news that could affect us, but I do believe downside is a little bit more likely for the next day or two for Tesla. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Tesla to the moon because the long-term future is still incredibly bright, and peace out.